Hi, I'm Bob Stoger, and I'm joining you tonight from my home in Spokane, Washington, in the northwestern part of the United States. It's a real pleasure to be able to be with you this evening. I started doing community development work in Spokane a long time ago. Back in the mid-70s, I and others created one of the early community development corporations in the United States. And for the next 25 years, most of my work was here. Towards the end of that time, I began to sense that while the work we were doing was helping individual people lead better lives, we weren't changing the underlying conditions that made that work necessary. In other words, things were still getting worse. It put me in lots of questions about what I understood about community development. And for the first 10 years of this century, I had a chance to work with people in communities in other parts of the world, in Zimbabwe, South Africa, India, Brazil, places where people were learning how to build community with what they had, with their own wisdom, with their own resources, with their own hopes. Friends of mine, particularly friends in India, started telling me what you're doing with us, the support you're giving us, the ways you're helping us connect with each other are really important. And unless you go home, we're all in big trouble. Because unless fundamental change happens in the United States, what we're doing here won't make enough of a difference. So by 2009, I was really hearing that, and I was starting to figure out how to bring my work home. What I didn't anticipate was that home would be Japan. Now, back in 1970, I went to Japan for the first time as a college student. Japan became an incredibly important part of my life. It became my spiritual home. It became the place where I discovered who I am. Well, I'm still discovering who I am, but it gave me a place to stand. And for 40 years, I'd had a important personal journey with Japan. I met the grandfather of my heart when I was there as a student. His son became the only grandfather that my daughter has ever known. My spouse and I met in Japan. So my whole family has been interwoven with Japan for a long time. And then this miracle happened. I got invited to bring my work on dialogue, participatory leadership, community resilience into Japan in 2010. And it was an incredible year. Much to my surprise, I ended up spending about 6 months in Japan. My daughter and my spouse also joined me in part of that work. We didn't know at the time how important what many of us were doing in Japan in 2010 would be for what happened in 2011 when the triple disasters came. And they came just a little over 3 years ago. I was here in Spokane at the time, but I knew immediately that I would go to Japan and that I would help people in Japan create the future that they wanted rather than just settling for government rebuilding the past. It's been an incredible 3 years. I've spent about half of my time in Japan. It's been a time that's filled with grief and joy and excitement and exhaustion. It's just been filled with life of being with people that are discovering how to find their way forward. It's been an amazing time. This question of how we go from disaster, how we use disaster as a springboard to build healthy and resilient communities is one that just stays right in the center of my heart these days. It's taken me into questions of what the hell is resilience? How does it happen? What's needed? Main thing is that we need each other. Resilience grows out of connected communities. It grows out of people who understand each other, understand each other's gifts, and agree to be in relationship with each other. We call it social capital. It's really people just getting along. But then the question is, where does that come from? What's required for a community to have a lot of social capital, for a community to have a lot of resilience? I think it starts at the personal level. Not that we're separate people. We're all connected. But there's stuff that we have to do. I was doing some work about this recently, and I was asked to think about what's needed to help people learn resilience, and do we do it in our schools? It was really interesting. Part of my conclusion was that we do none of it in our schools. We spend our time filling people up with information, most of which they can get on the internet when they need it. But we don't pay attention to resilience. So again, what does it mean? I came down to 7 things. 7 is a few too many to remember, but bear with me. The first is that we have to be ourselves. Can't be anyone else. We have to be who we truly are. Wouldn't it be wonderful if our learning systems helped people, helped each of us discover who we really are? Second is we have to do what matters. Not waste time doing things that don't matter. I know I spend a lot of time. I've spent a lot of time, and I still spend a lot of time doing things that don't matter. What truly matters? What's mine? What's mine to do? As we step into what truly matters, we have to stand up. We have to say, yes, I'm here. I'm ready. One of the things that I've learned in Japan is that when we stand up, we have to stand together. You know, there's this expression in Japanese: the nail that sticks up gets pounded down. Maybe you have an expression like that in your culture. And by the way, I have to admit that I'm really ignorant in terms of your culture and your context. So all I can really do is I can share some stories from mine that you might find helpful. But I'm not here to advise. I'm not here to tell you what to do. You're the ones who will figure that out. But back to Japan. So it's this energy of stand up and stand together that the disasters have brought forward. They've been this huge push for people to stand up for what they care about, for what matters. But in Japan, they've stood up and they've stood together. That's the energy that we need all over the world right now. When we've stood up and stayed together, we need to figure out what the hell to do. And we don't need a big master plan. What we need to know is what's our next step. What's our next minimum elegant step that will move us in the direction we want to go. And then we screw up our courage, and we find what we have, and we take that step. And then we pause, we look back, we see what happened, we talk about it, we learn from it, and then we take the next step. And we make the path by walking it, one step at a time. It's helpful important to have that sense of direction, to have a map. Even that has to be practiced with lightness. One of the important things that I've learned is that intention and surrender walk hand in hand. They're allies. They're together. You have intention, but then what I keep discovering is that I have to surrender how it's going to happen. I have to be willing to be present to what's actually going on and learn from it, to find that way forward. As we do this, part of what seems to me to be required in these times is we have to be in a radical embrace of ambiguity and uncertainty. We're in the messy middle, and I think we're going to spend the rest of our lives here, mine and yours. We're at a time when one era is dying, another era is being born. They're both with us, and it's messy. And it's not our job, to clean up that messiness. That's impossible. But our job is to learn how to be with the messiness and to continue to find our way forward without letting the messiness become a major distraction. Last but not least, we have to do this work for a place of joy. We have to enjoy it. We have to love what we're doing. Sure, it gets hard sometimes. But the work has to come out of joy. It has to come out of happiness. You know, there's so many stories from these last years. When I talk about happiness, I almost always think of a man who owns a fish processing plant in Ishinomaki, one of the coastal towns. A couple of years ago, I was co-hosting a learning journey with 7 people in their 20s from Japan and 7 people from 7 other countries there to learn about what were people learning in Tohoku. This guy was really busy. You know, everybody's really busy in Tohoku. He said, okay, I'll spend 45 minutes with you. The listening that the people on the journey gave him was so incredible that each time he would come to a pause in his story, he'd start up again. And he actually spent 2.5 hours with us. At one point, he said, you know, I used to think that having a new car and having my kids in the right school and having good appliances, that was pretty much it. You know, that's life. That's happiness. And he paused and he said, I don't think that way anymore. And he started talking about his own happiness. And he started talking about his need to be in real relationship with people. One of the things that I've heard so many people speak to is that as we do this work of building the communities that we want, we have to keep happiness at the center. You know, another thing that I want to add in tonight is how there's a whole bunch of stuff that I don't understand. Messy middle again, right? But the one thing I'm sure of is that this is intergenerational work. We need each other. We need each other across the generations. And we need to be able to encounter each other with respect and curiosity and generosity. and those flow in all directions. I know that sometimes people my age are inclined to think, you know, why aren't the young people respecting me more? After all, I've been here for a long time and I know all sorts of shit. Respect earns respect. It's when people see that I care about you and I care about what you know, and we're in this together. That's when the respect flows. That's when the curiosity flows. My world is made of stories these days, and when I say that, I'm immediately taken to a small village, also in the coastal area. And in this village, it's a village of fishers. And the fishers' fathers and their grandfathers had told them, when the big one comes, and it will come again, get to your boats. Get more than 50 meters of depth out in the ocean, or you'll die. Get moving, now. 10 fishers found their way to the harbor, and they got in their boats, and they went out together. They got out more than 50 meters. They felt the tsunami pass under them. It was snowing. It was getting dark. Communications were gone. Night falls. They see the hills and the fires. They don't know. They don't know if their families made it. They say, well, at least we can let our families know that we're here. And they turn on all their lights so their families could see them. The next morning they went back in. Their families were safe. They had each other. They had their boats. They had a place to begin. I remember talking with one woman. She told me it was really hard. It was just so hard in those first weeks and months. And frankly, I wanted to give up. I just wanted to give up. But there were these young people who'd come to help us. I couldn't give up because they were here. And I went, it's just the presence that's important. So many times I had the chance to be in conversation with young people from Tokyo. I don't know if there's a Manila swagger, but there's certainly a Tokyo swagger. We're pretty cool. We're from Tokyo. We're on top. But they wanted to help, and so they went. But they thought, okay, these country people, they're not too sharp, or they'd be living in Tokyo. So I'll come and I'll get them straightened out. I'll fix things, and we'll get this back on track. So they'd share this with me, and they'd have kind of a grin on their face. And they'd say, it didn't take me long. It took me a couple days. It took me a week. And I learned that what I was really there to do was to listen. Because these people were incredible. They had something much more authentic and real than I had in my life in Tokyo. And so respect started to grow. And they started to find ways to work together. That's the magic. That's the mystery. A month or so ago, I was talking with people from Okuma, which was a village of 11,000, not far from the nuclear reactors. completely evacuated, and now it's safe to return. Of the 11,000, 2,000 have said they will go back. They're all over 60. My logical mind goes, no way in hell. 2,000 people over 60 can't build a community again. Just not going to happen. And then my heart calms and reminds me that it's going to. They're going to do it. How they're going to do it is a mystery. Probably goes back to that stuff about being yourself and doing what matters and standing up and standing together. But part of what I know is that their determination and their energy is going to call in young people from all around Japan. That there's going to be people that go to stand with them and build that community again. And it's the intergenerational energy that will help us find our way forward. I think it's going to be an incredible time. So a few things just to offer you some stories out of Japan. I really wish that I could be there with you tonight. Someday soon, I hope to be able to be with you in the Philippines. You know, in order to do this, I've kind of had to imagine that we're sitting together in a big circle, not here with all of these books behind me. And I hope that will happen someday, because I'd love to hear what you're discovering. I'd love to hear what you're discovering about you and who you really are and how you're coming alive as you discover the relationships that are important for building a new future in the Philippines. Thanks so much for inviting me and for spending this time with me. Sweet journeys until we meet. Bye-bye.